Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. For the second week in a row, we unfortunately have to start this week's show with gun violence. Less than 2 weeks after 10 people were killed right here in Buffalo in our own backyard, a second mass shooting took the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. And because these 2 shootings happened so close together, it's reignited the national debate over access to guns, including here in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul said this week that she wants to raise the age to buy some guns in New York to 21. And she says that idea came from one thing that both shooters had in common: their age.
The common denominator? There are 3. The weapon was an AR-15. The perpetrator was a male. And the age of the perpetrator was 18. I don't want 18-year-olds to have guns. At least not in the state of New York.
But with the legislative session scheduled to end next week, it's going to be a scramble to get that done and other new gun laws. Let's get into it with John Campbell from WNYC and Gothamist. John, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So can we clarify what the governor meant by raising the age to 21? Would this just be for AR-15s? Is this for all guns, or do we know?
Well, the governor said at a minimum, she said that twice, at a minimum it would apply to AR-15s in her mind, but she said she would look at everything. Now, negotiations at this point seem to have focused on AR-15s and AR-15 style rifles. Those are semi-automatic long guns, rifles. And those are the ones that we have seen used in many, many mass shootings, including the one in Buffalo, including the one in Texas. In both of those instances, those were 18-year-old males who legally purchased the weapons. In the case of Buffalo, the alleged perpetrator illegally modified it after it put a high-capacity magazine on. You can only have low-capacity, 10-capacity magazines in New York. And so the governor wants a law that raises the age that you can purchase that weapon from 18 to 21 in New York. Some other states have done that in some form or fashion in recent years, including California, including Florida, and those are kind of pending in the appeals courts right now. In California, there was a ruling that perhaps it violates the Second Amendment. Florida has been upheld so far, but the governor said she doesn't care. She can't let the courts get in the way of what she thinks is good policy, and she's going to give it a shot.
It's interesting because as we read about these gun laws, the AR-15s, I thought that they were banned under the SAFE Act, and to some extent they were. But since then, gun manufacturers, some of them, more of the online retailers, have kind of done modifications to make them legal, and really I Googled, can you buy an AR-15 in New York? And what you get as the first results is, well, you can, but you have to do all this stuff, and here's a step-by-step guide, which is really interesting to me. Let's talk about not really the politics of it, but we have 3 days of session left, John. Can they get this done? It's a last-minute measure. I could see them staying late to do it, but I'm just wondering if the will is there.
Well, it's that measure, and there's a few other measures that they're looking at, possibly expanding the red flag law to include other potential reporters that can get an extreme risk protection order that would allow a judge to essentially take somebody's guns away.
Yeah.
There are a number of things. There are 3 days left, but you have a Democratic Senate, you have a Democratic Assembly, you have a Democratic governor. They all want to show that they are taking some action in response to these brutal, heinous shootings, including one in our state. So they are moving in that direction. But listen, things come together, fall apart in Albany all the time at the drop of a hat. You know, it could happen, it could not happen. There's only 3 session days left. I think right now they are moving towards something happening, but how broad that is, that remains to be seen.
You asked her at her press conference on Thursday or Wednesday when she was at the Interstate Gun Violence Task Force about microstamping, which is an idea that's been around for several years. We talked a little bit about it last week as well with Brian Kavanaugh. What do you think about that? You know, there hasn't been the political will, not really political, but nobody's been convinced in the legislature to do this. Yeah. Is this something that will push them, do you think, or is that something that is just not going to come together?
Well, this certainly seems like the best time, the best chance in more than a decade for microstamping to pass. That is something that Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York City had pushed way back in 2010, and it actually failed in the Senate. They pulled the vote before it was almost certain failure. And it is something that has been brought up year after year. It goes away for a couple years, it comes back a couple years, and this year, for the first time, it really seems to have a real chance of passage. But there are a lot of details. This isn't a thing where you just flip a switch and then microstamping starts tomorrow. Microstamping is you fire a bullet and a microscopic stamp with your identifying information is on that bullet. It's supposed to help law enforcement. The idea is for cold cases, things like that, or things that otherwise would be cold cases, this would help you have a lead as to who originally purchased the weapon that was used. It seems headed in the direction of passage, but there is lobbying from the gun industry, which does not want to do this. It's only really happened in one state so far, that's California, and even California, they passed it in 2007, and for more than a decade, it was toothless. The gun manufacturers found this way around it or that way around it. Now there has been some changes to the law in the last couple of years that they finally are getting to a point of near implementation of implementation.
Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, but I think that one's going to be really interesting to watch. You know, since we've been looking at that one for so many years and it just hasn't moved, is this going to be that moment? So we'll see. John Campbell from WNYC and Gothamist, thank you.
Thank you.